My name is Gladys Radek. I'm originally from Wet'suwet'en, Witsat, and I am an advocate for the missing and murdered women, particularly on the Highway of Tears, but I also advocate for women and girls across the country. Most of my life I believed that my mother neglected me, and I found out after the fact, after my mother even passed away, what had happened was they had hired a babysitter, and it was the babysitter that took off and left us kids alone. And that's why they took us, that's why they stole us. They were, accused my mother of neglecting, and I was really hurt when I found out that it wasn't her that neglected us, it was the babysitter. That's how we ended up in foster care. And that system really sucks. There was lots of violence, lots of drinking. I went through, my life with, of course, a lot of actions like drinking, doing drugs, feeling sorry for myself, not knowing how to deal with the fact that nobody would listen to me when I was an abused young girl. I've been sober now for 13 years, but I did start drinking at 9. I started smoking marijuana at 9. Started doing hard drugs when I was 12. It didn't take much, but it was all to mask that pain that was in my heart and how worthless I felt. I decided in 1999 to file a complaint with the Vancouver RCMP, and I charged my abuser, and he got a slap on the wrist. I wasn't happy with that, but I'm a survivor. I'm not going to let them take me down. They've taken me down as far as they can, and there's nowhere for me to go but up. I decided I was going to go back to school from 96 to 99. So I was in Vancouver, and I ended up going to the Native Education Center, which is where I think that I gained my voice and being proud of who I am as a First Nations woman, because I never really thought about it, because things were so bad for me all the time, and how being treated as a First Nations woman. So back in '99, I also launched a human rights tribunal where I was successful in proving systemic racism for the first time ever in Canada through tribunal. I was living in Vancouver. I was living across the street from Tinseltown Mall, it's called, and was systemically followed by security. We lived in the building across the street from it, and you could tell it was a Native housing building because it had a big mask carved on the front of the building, so everybody knew, right? So anybody that left our building was targeted. We were told to leave the mall. We were told that we couldn't go in there. We were asked what we were doing in the mall. We were followed. We were treated like common thieves for about 6 months while I lived in this building. And so I went after their policy, and basically we found out through the tribunal that it was their handwritten policy that First Nations people were not allowed in that mall. So what I did was I did change the policy, and now in all of BC, it is mandatory that they take a human rights module in their training package before they're handed their licenses. That's what I wanted. So that's really what gave me my voice, was because it took us 4 years to go through that Human Rights Tribunal, and that's when I realized, you know, how all of our people were being treated all the time. I started advocating for missing and murdered women when my niece, my beautiful niece, Tamara Chipman, disappeared from Prince Rupert, BC in September 21st, 2005. The reason that it was heartbreaking for me is because back in 2002, when I was going to court here in Terrace, I moved back here for a year to do that. And Tamara was a mainstay in my house. She knew I was going to court. She was my moral support throughout my court proceedings. She knew what was going on, and she would come over every day, and just to see how I was doing. And she'd come over regularly and eat with us. But she spent a lot of time with me. After Tamara went missing, it was. First of all, it broke my heart because I knew that she had her son, and she had her son after I left. I was actually looking forward to meeting him with her, and it didn't work out that way because she disappeared. And of course we got Tamara, my beautiful girl. But this is, yeah, it is a timely process for me to do the pictures and laminating them. So what I'm going to do right now is I have a few printed out right now, and what I'll do is print them out, and then I'll laminate them, and then I'll put them on my vehicle. And after I'm done putting them on the vehicle, I usually go around and bless them all with my smudge, and you know, just and then I share their stories. That's the whole idea behind it, is to share their stories. This one's real special in my heart too. Anime Pictou Aquash, originally from Nova Scotia. And I know her daughter. Her daughter, I think, was a baby when her mother was killed. I remember the first van that we had. I had 131 pictures on there, all missing and unsolved murders. But it made such a profound impact, because we started collecting names, not just from the Highway of Tears, but we also had the Picton Farm. We had Cody Ledjabokoff. We're notorious in BC for serial killers. Through talking to the family members, that's the reason that I kept on putting the pictures on my van. I find that it's a good way to raise awareness and also bring in more allies. You know, when people see the van, they're just flabbergasted, and so many times they ask me, what can I do to help?
I heard about what Gladys was doing, and I reached out to her. What I do for a living is I'm an archaeologist. And when I was thinking about the missing and murdered women, just an idea popped into my head that, like, hey, someone could map all the known locations where women have gone missing, where women have been found, and map a corridor along the highway of places that are higher risk, higher potential places for people to go missing. So in closer proximity to the communities where they're hitchhiking to and from. And then in addition to that, we could map out and try to predict where potentially a perpetrator or a murderer might try to dump or hide a body, and try to predict where those places might be. And then once we have everything mapped, we can look at commonalities and try to figure out in those high risk locations, could we possibly put up better lighting? Could we put in cameras? Could those places be regularly monitored or surveyed to check on them? I think it would just be a good way of keeping track of what's happened along the highway and what could potentially happen into the future.
When they had the symposium in Prince George in March 2006, my cousin Florence had organized a walk. She was initially going to do it from Prince Rupert to Terrace to raise awareness about Tamara and about the two girls from our community. And she wanted to walk. She wanted to do something to honor those women. When I heard about that, I wanted to go because now I was a brand new family member with a missing niece, and of course a couple other girls that I knew were my nieces. And of course I lost the use of my leg when I was 18 years old. The day before my 18th birthday, I was in a motorcycle accident and I lost the use of my leg, and I chose to have it amputated 4 years later. But that didn't stop me from wanting to raise awareness. I remember the feeling that I got when I first started walking, and I realized that for every step that we took, you could feel actually the spirits of the women. And we knew by that time that there was quite a few that were actually missing out of Prince Rupert. It wasn't just Tamara. There was Alberta Williams, there was Mary Jane Hill, you know, and that's going back years. So that's when we realized how serious this was, and this is why it was called the Highway of Tears through Florence's relatives, where they realized that from Prince Rupert to Prince George, there was an awful lot of family members that were crying because their loved ones were either missing or unsolved murders. And the not knowing creates a lot of tears too. So we did make it up for the symposium. And it was very well done, because all of the recommendations that they made, there was 33 recommendations, were done by the families. Unfortunately, not all of them, even to this date, have been implemented. When Tamara went missing, I met a lady, Bernie Williams. She was active, quite active as an advocate. So in 2007, I noticed that nobody was really pushing with this Highway of Tears initiative. I thought about Florence's walks, and I asked Bernie, I said, so you think it would be a good idea if we walked across the country for the missing and murdered women? And she jumped all over it. She said, well, let's not talk about it, let's do it. And through prayer, we did it. So that went on from Walk for Justice 2008 2009, 2010, 2011. And then I took another little break because I wanted to see if anything was going to happen, see if there's going to be any positive movements or anything towards protecting our women. And as it turns out, there was nothing. That's when I decided, you know, I'd heard from so many family members at that point in time, and that was in 2006, 2007. Where the families were saying, you know, if they're not going to do anything, well, then we need a national public inquiry. And we had no idea how much it was going to entail and how many issues pertaining to our women and girls that made it unsafe for us to be in this country. The national inquiry, the recommendations that came out of there, there's 231 calls to justice. And the thing that bugs me is that it did stop at the government's door. We handed Justin Trudeau a copy of the recommendations. It took him 2 days to spit the word genocide out. The national inquiry proved it, otherwise they wouldn't have put it in their findings. See, when we had the inquiry, when we delivered it, they were supposed to have a vast majority of those recommendations done within the first year, and then COVID hit. And then they used that for an excuse for them not to be able to move forward. But the recommendations, I think they're trying really hard to keep them on the shelf. But we do have a lot of, also through our walks, as we discovered that we've got tons of really good grassroots women that are working on the cause. And our women are definitely rising, and the thing is, it's still, right now, it's still a little bit early. And the biggest push actually we have right now is the need for good, proper health, healing, and wellness facilities across the board. Because in order for any of us to move forward with a clear conscience, we need to be on our healing journey. Then we can work on it. We can work on it together. The one thing I do ask for people to do is to go to their MLAs, go to their politicians and demand answers and demand them to implement all of the recommendations that have been made. So when I moved back to Terrace here, I put the word out with my friends and said that I wanted this totem pole, and fortunate for us, Michael D'Angeli came forward and said that he would do it for us. So I relayed to him what my vision was to have a commemoration totem pole to honor our missing and murdered women and the LGBTQ. And when I explained to him the reason why, and it was for the families, he jumped on it right away. I only told him once the story about what I wanted to see on the pole, and he got it. He has put our story on this totem pole.
Why simgi gat sigam hanach kububuksen got samil at a teeth clean at a Mike D'Angeli lagamsiwa. This beautiful patan, this beautiful pole was commissioned and was asked to do this pole. As I listened to what Gladys and Arlene and the funders were wanting as far as the totem pole, And I quickly sketched down something and then presented it to them at that meeting. And so what they were asking for was the bottom figure, which is a nech, a killer whale, and where this totem pole is the Gisbatwada territory of the Kitsim-Kalim people. So this is killer whale territory. The main little blowhole figure is the water bean, as water is life, and that connects us all together. On either side of the pectoral fin are little human beings, and they represent the people of Kitsim-Kalim outside of the killer whale clan. The figure, both the female and the male figure inside the tail, they're not upside down out of disrespect, it's just the way the sculpture went. But what they represent is the people that call the Lakyubum Tsimshian, the Tsimshian territory of Terrace, home, whether they be First Nations or not, or other nations. The next figures on the sides represent the children who went to residential school, who have had to carry on with the murdered and missing people, and they represent our children, our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews. The main central figure in the very middle represents the young girl of the murdered and missing, the young woman. On her and the female on the killer whale tail, and as well on these two, they have what are called kawits, which is the labret, which is a sign of a young noble or a noble woman. And so what I wanted to do is I asked my wife to actually paint these two to imbue that power of femininity. The next figure is the grandmother, the auntie, the mother, the sister, and she has a hand-pounded kawits out of copper that I pounded. On her button robe, the circle or the figure 8, showing that we're in constant transformation. So when our belief system is a really old belief that we are reincarnated, and oftentimes we'll come progressing into the next life, we'll come as a salmon first before we take a human or an animal form. And so what this represents is this transition of shifting into other beings. And on her robe, rather than using buttons, I inlaid mirrors. So what that does is it shows people are always watching, no matter, even if it's just a single person out here, that somebody's always witnessing, somebody's always watching what you're doing. It's a really old belief. The very top figure on the matriarch's hat is a robin, and the robin is Kitsim-Kalim. They're the people of the robin, the Gillikil. And so I kind of sandwiched in the whose territory is, and then I'm paying tribute but also honoring whose territory and land this is on.
You know, like the thing with our totem poles and everything, they last a lifetime and for several generations. So people are going to know 7 generations from now that this terrace is the hub of the Highway of Tears, one of the major hubs for the Highway of Tears. That's why we always say that our women are lost but never forgotten. We're not going to let them forget.